The Islamic daily prayers are a cornerstone of faith slash 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 slash
a rhythmic cycle connecting believers to the divine. These prayers, performed 5 times a day, are not merely rituals, but a
carefully structured system with its own internal mathematical harmony. Each prayer consists of a specific number of units called rak'ahs. These units, 2, 4, 4, 3, and 4 respectively, total 17 throughout the day. This number 17 is not arbitrary. Embedded within this number are clues to a deeper understanding of the Quran's structure and the mathematical principles woven into its very fabric. Just as the celestial bodies move in predictable patterns, so too does the Quran reveal a divine order through its numerical composition. Throughout history, various cultures and religions have recognized the power and significance of numbers in reflecting cosmic truths. In the context of the Quran, these numerical patterns are not mere coincidences, but deliberate signs placed by the divine author. The daily prayers, with their precise number of units, serve as a constant reminder of this underlying mathematical harmony, urging Muslims to approach the Quran with a sense of awe and wonder. The number 29 holds a special place within the Quran's numerical framework, particularly in relation to the lunar calendar. This calendar, consisting of either 29 or 30 days each month, is intrinsically linked to the cycles of the moon. The number 29, representing the shorter lunar cycle, appears in the Quran in a variety of contexts, often pointing towards the importance of time, revelation, and divine decree. One of the most striking examples of this is the mention of a prescribed period of 29 days in chapter 41, verse 10. While the exact nature of this period is open to interpretation, it underscores the significance of this number in relation to divine timing and the unfolding of God's plan. The moon, with its constantly changing phases, serves as a powerful symbol of time, change, and the ephemeral nature of the material world. By embedding the number 29 within the Quran's structure, God subtly reminds humanity of his control over time and the inevitability of his decree. This connection between the number 29 and the lunar calendar is not coincidental. Chapter 1, also known as the opening Al-Fatihah, holds a unique position in the Quran. As the first chapter, it serves as an introduction to the entire book, encapsulating its core message of guidance, mercy, and submission to the one God. It is also the most frequently recited chapter, forming an integral part of every prayer. The chapter consists of 7 verses, and the total number of words in these verses is 29. This deliberate emphasis on the number 29 in the very first chapter of the Quran suggests its importance in understanding the book as a whole. Just as the number 29 represents a complete lunar cycle, so too does chapter 1 represent a complete cycle of spiritual guidance. It begins with praise and acknowledgement of God's sovereignty and ends with a plea for guidance on the straight path. This cyclical structure, mirroring the lunar cycle represented by the number 29, reinforces the idea of a divine order underpinning both the cosmos and the Quran. And each time a Muslim bows their head in prayer, they are reminded of the number 29 and its connection to divine timing, revelation, and the cyclical nature of creation. Chapter 9, titled Repentance at Tawbah, is a lengthy and complex chapter that deals with a range of themes, including war, peace, and the relationship between Muslims and non-Muslims. It is also a chapter steeped in history, specifically the events surrounding the Battle of Tabuk, the last military expedition led by the Prophet Muhammad himself. The total number of verses in chapter 9 is 129, a multiple of 29, The Battle of Tabuk, which took place in the 9th year of the Islamic lunar calendar, was a pivotal moment in early Islamic history. It marked a turning point in the relationship between the nascent Muslim community and the surrounding tribes, solidifying Muslim dominance in the Arabian Peninsula. Abdullah Yusuf Ali, in his renowned commentary on the Quran, highlights the significance of this historical event in relation to chapter 9. He notes that the chapter's verses, revealed in the aftermath of the battle, provided guidance and instruction to the Muslim community as they navigated the challenges of establishing a new social order. The fact that chapter 9, revealed in the 9th year of the Islamic calendar and dealing with such a pivotal historical event, also exhibits a clear numerical connection to the number 29, further strengthens the argument for a deliberate mathematical design within the Quran. Chapter 27, named after the prophet Moses, narrates the story of Moses and his mission to guide the children of Israel out of slavery in Egypt. It is a story filled with miracles, divine intervention, and the struggle between faith and disbelief. The name Moses is mentioned 29 times throughout the entire Quran. While this may seem like a small detail, it takes on added meaning when we consider the importance of Moses as a prophet and the central role he plays in chapter 27. The story of Moses, with its themes of divine justice, the inevitability of God's decree, and the ultimate triumph of faith, aligns with the broader message conveyed by the number 29 in the Quran. The subtle yet persistent presence of the number 29 in relation to chapter 27, along with its connection to the life and message of Moses, suggests that even seemingly minor numerical details within the Quran can hold deeper layers of meaning. This chapter, while not as explicitly connected to the number 29 as chapters 1 and 9, still exhibits subtle numerical resonances that hint at its significance. The numbers 9, 27 and 29 do not exist in isolation within the Quran's numerical framework. Rather, they are interconnected, forming a web of relationships that point towards a deeper, more unified system of meaning. The number 9, for instance, is a factor of both 27 and 29. This simple mathematical fact takes on added significance when we consider the prominence of all three numbers in the Quran's structure and symbolism. The number 9, often associated with completeness and perfection, is reflected in the 9 verses of chapter 1 and the 9th year of the Islamic calendar, the year of the Battle of Tabuk. These interconnected numerical relationships suggest that the Quran's mathematical structure is not random but carefully orchestrated. Each number, while holding its own specific meaning, also contributes to a larger tapestry of numerical symbolism, reinforcing the idea of a divine blueprint underlying the text. The use of numbers as symbols is a common thread running through many religious and mystical traditions. Numbers, beyond their practical applications, have long been seen as representing abstract concepts, cosmic principles, and even divine attributes. In Pythagoreanism, for example, numbers were considered the building blocks of reality, each number vibrating with its own unique energy and meaning. Similarly, in the Kabbalistic tradition of Judaism, numbers and letters are seen as interconnected, each letter possessing a numerical value and a corresponding spiritual significance. The Quran, while not explicitly engaging in gematria, nevertheless utilizes numbers in a symbolic way, suggesting that certain numbers hold deeper meanings and connections to the divine realm. The consistent emphasis on specific numbers, such as 29, 9 and 27, throughout the Quran's structure, content, and historical context, points towards a deliberate use of numbers as symbols, inviting believers to delve deeper into the text's hidden layers of meaning. This symbolic use of numbers in the Quran should not be seen as a form of numerology, which often seeks to predict the future or divine hidden meanings through arbitrary calculations. The Quran, as the revealed word of God, is a multifaceted text, rich in symbolism, history, and spiritual guidance. Its mathematical structure, while often overlooked, is an integral part of its tapestry, adding another layer of meaning to its verses. The deliberate use of numbers, such as 29, 9 and 27, throughout the Quran's structure and content, suggests a divine intentionality, a blueprint underlying the text that points towards a higher order. These numbers, far from being random occurrences, serve as signposts guiding readers towards a deeper understanding of the Quran's message and its connection to the cosmos. The Quran, in its essence, is a tapestry woven from threads of revelation and calculation. The mathematical patterns embedded within its verses are not meant to be deciphered through complex equations, but rather contemplated upon, prompting reflection and a deeper appreciation for the divine artistry of the Quran. The exploration of the Quran's mathematical patterns is a journey that has only just begun. While scholars and commentators have identified certain key numbers and their potential significance, much remains to be discovered. The Quran, with its intricate structure and multi-layered meanings, continues to reveal its secrets to those who approach it with sincerity and an open mind. The purpose of this essay has not been to provide definitive answers, but rather to spark curiosity and encourage further exploration. The mathematical patterns discussed, while compelling, are but a glimpse into the vast ocean of knowledge contained within the Quran. The Quran, as the final revelation from God, is a book meant for all times and all people. May this exploration into the astro-mathematical secrets of the Quran inspire us to approach this sacred text with renewed reverence and a thirst for knowledge, seeking to unlock its timeless wisdom and guidance for our lives. The video you've described delves into the astro-mathematical significance of certain numbers and elements within the Quran, focusing particularly on number 29 and its relation to specific chapters and verses. Here's a breakdown of the key points made. Number 29 and daily prayer integers. The video begins by discussing the integers associated with daily prayers, 2, 4, 4, 3, and 4, establishing a mathematical context. It then moves to discuss how number 29 proves its astro-mathematical value in relation to these integers. Significance in Quran's chapters. Chapter 1, Al-Fatihah. It lacks Bismillah at the beginning, and its position is highlighted as significant, especially as it precedes the largest chapter by verses. Chapter 9, At-Tawbah. This chapter has 129 verses, and the first 29 verses are distinctly different in tone and content from the rest, focusing on wartime policies. The absence of Bismillah at its start is noted as significant. Chapter 27, An-Naml, contains 2 Bismillahs, with exactly 29 verses between them, which is presented as a self-evident sign of number 29's significance. The chapter's placement after the second largest chapter is also emphasized. Mathematical patterns and structures. The video references various mathematical relationships, like the sum of digits, the number of words in verses, and the composition of chapters based on when parts were revealed, showcasing a complex mathematical fabric woven into the Quran's text. Specific numbers like 9, 27, and 29 are analyzed for their mathematical properties. For example, 9 is 3 squared, 27 is 3 cubed, and various operations involving 29. Cultural and historical context. The video mentions that these mathematical observations are independent of opinions, suggesting a universal, self-evident truth. It also refers to historical events like the military campaign of Tabuk for context on when parts of the Quran were revealed. Abdullah Yusuf Ali's commentary, cited for his introduction to chapter 9, where the first 29 verses were significant enough to be publicly announced during Hajj for wide dissemination. This discussion frames the Quran not just as a religious text, but one with profound mathematical dimensions which are seen as part of its divine nature or structure. However, the interpretations and the significance of these mathematical elements are subject to debate among scholars, as they can be seen through various theological, historical, or cultural lenses. The video's approach suggests a deep respect for the text's complexity, aiming to reveal hidden layers of meaning through numbers. Thank you for watching. In our first discussion, we began with the 5 integers of daily prayer that are 2, 4, 4, 3, and 4, independent of other opinions and perspectives. In pure mathematics, we proved the astro-mathematical value of the 5 integers. The equation of the 5 cubes of the 5 integers of daily prayers on this page is an example. In this discussion, we reflect on another significant astro-mathematical number of the Quran, number 29. Number 29, independent of other opinions and perspectives in a self-evident way, explains the cause of the puzzling position of the Bismillah in the first chapter of the Quran, the absence of Bismillah in chapter 9, and the two Bismillahs in chapter 27. The three chapters are highlighted with red dots on the graph. You also notice that chapter 1 is right before the largest chapter of the Quran with 286 verses, and chapter 27 is right after the second largest chapter with 227 verses. So the first one is before the largest chapter, and chapter 27 is right after the second largest chapter. In addition, number 29 objectively explains the 29 secret codes of the Quran that are in the beginning of 29 chapters of the book. The statement of the proof here is from chapter 27. That is one of the three puzzling chapters. In this discussion, chapter 27 is also where, inshallah, we will begin to prove the significance of number 29 in these chapters. Chapter 27 has two Bismillahs. The picture on the left shows that there are exactly 29 verses between the first and the second Bismillah of chapter 27. This is the first self-evident sign of the significance of number 29 in relation to Bismillah in these three chapters. This is also a sign of the deeper mathematical dimensions of the Quran. Chapter 9 has 100 plus 29 verses. This simple equation that divides the 129 verses into 129 is very significant because it is the equation of the composition of the chapter. The first 29 verses of the chapter have a noticeable tone and message that is very different from the following 100 verses. This difference and the shift after verse 29 is clear and self-evident. The first 29 verses are about the wartime policies, and in verse 29 we see the last policy at the end of the first 29 chapters. So the 29 chapters all are about war policy, and verse 29 is the last verse of this group. According to Abdullah Yusuf Ali in his introduction to chapter 9, the first 29 verses were very significant and were read by Imam Ali alayhi salam during the Hajj to give these policies the widest publicity. This is the second sign of the significance of number 29 in these three chapters, and a sign of the deeper mathematical dimensions of the Quran, which is also self-evident in the simple equation of the composition of the chapter. According to a large number of documents, including this one on this page from Wiki, verse 29 of chapter 9 of the Quran is notable as dealing with the imposition of a tax on non-Muslims who have fallen under Muslim rule. This well-known verse, verse 29, is another sign of the significance of number 29 in these three chapters, but also a sign of the deeper mathematical dimension of the Quran. The first 29 verses of chapter 9 were revealed on the military campaign of Tabuk, and after the last 100 verses that had been revealed at an earlier time. So you have the 100 verses, and then these 29 come together at a later time. So you think these 29, in terms of composition of the book, should go to the end, but that's not the way it happens. However, in composition of the chapter, the 29 verses that were revealed later are before the 100 verses that were revealed earlier, which is a remarkable shift in the composition of the chapter and something memorable. This is another sign of the significance of number 29 in these three chapters, and a sign of the deeper mathematical dimensions of the Quran. In addition, verse 29 of chapter 9 has exactly 29 words, which is equal to the number of words of chapter 1 and the number of verses between the two Bismillahs of chapter 27. This is another sign of the deeper mathematical dimensions of the Quran and the significance of number 29 in these three chapters. In the mathematical fabric of the Quran, as we had an example in our first discussion, a clear example, the chapters and verses numbers, and the number of verses, words, letters, and dots, they are all significant. Chapter 9 and chapter 27 were revealed in different places, in different pieces, in different times, under harsh and chaotic circumstances, and the Prophet, peace be upon him, could not read and write. But the two chapters are related in harmony and elegantly and mathematically complementary. The two beautiful equations on this page are the small parts of a much larger mathematical structure. Here are a few more equations. Okay, you notice that the digit sum of 9 is 9 and the digit sum of 27 is 2 plus 7 is equal 9. It's the same thing. The same digit sum, when you apply it to the number of verses, is 1 plus 2 plus 9 is 12, and 9 plus 3 is also 12. You also notice that 129 is 3 times the prime number. the prime number 43, and number 93 is also 3 times the prime number 31. You notice that number 9 is a square of 2, and number 27 is the cube of 3. Oh, a square of 3. 9 is this roughly, I'm sorry, and 27 is the cube of 3. You also notice that when it comes to number 29, when you subtract number 29 from 129, it gives you a square of 10. And when you subtract 29 from 93, it gives you a square of 8. You also notice that the sum of the chapter numbers is equal to 36. And the difference of the chapter verses is also equal to 36. You notice that 93 can be described as the sum of 6 consecutive numbers, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. You also notice that number 129 is also the sum of 6 consecutive numbers that begin right after the 6 consecutive numbers of number 93 here. The 6 consecutive numbers are 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24. Here, both 93 and 129 have exactly the same generating function, 3n times n minus 1 plus 3. When you plug in n is equal to 6, you get 93, and when you plug in the next number, which is 7, you're going to get number 129. So this is just the tip of the iceberg of the mathematical structure here. Inshallah, we reflect on it in later discussions. Inshallah, we will continue this work in the next discussion, which would be chapter 3. Here's a detailed exploration of the numerical and astro-mathematical significance of certain aspects of the Quran as described in the video, focusing on chapters 1, 9, and 27. Chapter 1. Al-Fatihah position and absence of Bismillah. How Al-Fatihah is the first chapter of the Quran. But unlike other chapters, it does not start with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim at the beginning of the text in some manuscripts. Why? The absence is often seen as a unique characteristic, highlighting the chapter's importance as an opening supplication. Details: number of words. Al-Fatihah contains 29 words in Arabic. Mathematical insight. The number 29 ties into the broader numerical patterns discussed, suggesting an intentional structure. Chapter 9. At Tabuk composition and verses. How the chapter has 129 verses, with the first 29 verses distinct from the rest in content and tone. Why? Historical context. The first 29 verses deal with wartime policies during the campaign of Tabuk. This part was revealed later than the rest of the chapter, which explains the shift in theme. Mathematical pattern, division, 129 equals 100 plus 29, showing a clear structural division. Verse 29. This verse marks the end of the policy section, and it has exactly 29 words, matching the number of words in Al-Fatihah. Digit sum. The digit sum of 129, 1 plus 2 plus 9 equals 12, matches that of 93, 9 plus 3 equals 12, linking these two chapters mathematically. Prime numbers. 129 equals sign 331, where 31 is prime, showing a pattern in prime factorization. Mathematical equations and observations. Subtraction with 29 divided 129 to 29 equals 100, which is a perfect square, 10 squared. 93 minus 29 equals 64, another perfect square, 8 squared. Consecutive number sum 93, equal sign 13 plus 14 plus 15 plus 16 plus 17 plus 18, sum of 6 consecutive integers. 129 equal sign 19 plus 20 plus 21 plus 22 plus 23 plus 24, continuing from where 93 left off. Chapter 27, An-Naml 2, Bismillah's How. This chapter uniquely contains 2 Bismillah, one at the start and another at verse 30. Why mathematical significance? There are precisely 29 verses between these 2 Bismillahs. Symbolism. This might symbolize completeness or the end of one section and the start of another in the narrative or thematic structure. Detail. Verse count. 27, 1 to 27 divided 29 equals 29 verses. Cube of 3, 27 equals sign 3 cubed, adding another layer to the significance of the chapter number. General mathematical fabric, astro-mathematical value. 5 integers of daily prayer. These are 2, 4, 4, 3, 4, representing the rakats for each prayer time. Fajr, Du'a, Asr, Maghrib, Isha. Cubes. The video might suggest examining the cubes of these numbers for deeper connections, though not explicitly stated in the transcript. Mathematical dimensions, digit sums. The consistency in digit sums between chapter numbers, 9 and 27, both sum to 9, suggests a deliberate pattern. Sequence and sum. The structure of chapters and verses often aligns with patterns in number sequences, sums and squares, which could be interpreted as part of the Quran's mathematical fabric. This analysis highlights a viewpoint where the Quran is seen not only as a spiritual text, but also as a document with intricate mathematical and numerical patterns, which some interpret as part of its miraculous nature. However, these interpretations are subject to scholarly debate and should be considered within the broader context of Islamic theology and numerology. Continue. Clear answer to. Continuing from where we left off, let's delve deeper into the mathematical structure and explore additional layers of significance, focusing on how these numbers and patterns might be interpreted. Further mathematical interpretations. Number 29's significance, completion and transition. In both chapters 9 and 27, the number 29 appears to signify a transition or completion. In chapter 9, it marks the end of the war policy section, and in chapter 27, it's between two significant invocations of Bismillah, which might symbolize a transition in the narrative or spiritual guidance. Secret codes. The mention of 29 secret codes at the beginning of 29 chapters could refer to the mysterious letters, also known as muqatta'at, which appear at the start of some chapters. These letters are a subject of much scholarly debate regarding their meanings or purposes. Mathematical relationships, chapter numbers and verses 9 and 27, both numbers are related through their digit sums, 9, and their cubic relationships, 9 equals sine 3 squared, 27 equals sine 3 cubed. This might suggest a thematic or structural continuity or enhancement between these chapters. Chapter 9's verses. The breakdown of chapter 9 into 29 and 100 verses could be symbolic of the lunar calendar. 29 days in a lunar month, roughly 12 months in a year. Hence, 29 plus 100 could represent a full cycle or year. Prime numbers and their significance. Divisibility by 3. Both 93 and 129 are divisible by 3, which in numerology often represents harmony, creativity, and the Trinity in Islamic context. E. G. The three Abrahamic religions, the three fundamental aspects of life: birth, life, death. Generating functions. The formula given for generating 93 and 129 from a sequence, 3NN1 plus 3, shows how these numbers fit into a pattern. This could be interpreted as a mathematical signature of divine design or order, where numbers are not random but part of an intricate system. Broader implications and interpretations. Mathematical proof of divine design. Some scholars might argue that these mathematical patterns, if not coincidental, provide evidence of the Quran's divine origin, as they would require an understanding of mathematics beyond what was commonly known in 7th century Arabia. Numerology in Islam. While numerology isn't central to mainstream Islamic theology, there's a tradition of looking for deeper meanings in numbers in Islamic mysticism or Sufism. These patterns could be seen as part of that mystical interpretation. Criticism and caution. Critics might argue that attributing too much significance to these numbers risks veering into numerology over theology, potentially leading to misinterpretations of the Quran's primary messages. The Quran itself warns against following conjecture or unproven assertions. Cultural and academic context. In academic circles, these observations might be part of a broader study into the linguistic and structural miracles of the Quran, looking at language, poetry, and now mathematics to understand the text's complexity. Conclusion. This exploration into the numerical aspects of the Quran, as presented in the video, underscores a view where the text is seen as a multi-layered document, where mathematics is one lens through which its beauty, structure, and possibly divine origin might be appreciated. However, interpretation should be balanced with the Quranic emphasis on its clear verses and the straightforward messages of faith, morality, and guidance it provides, ensuring that the numerical fascination does not overshadow the spiritual and ethical teachings. Here I'll provide specific numerical calculations and their implications based on the details from the video transcript. 1. Integer. Sum of daily prayers. How? The integers of daily prayers are 2, 4, 4, 3, 4. Why? These numbers represent the number of rakats, units of prayer, for each of the 5 daily prayers in Islam: Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha. Calculation. Sum equals sine 2 plus 4 plus 4 plus 3 plus 4 equals 17. The sum doesn't directly correspond to any single significant number in this context, but implication. This could be seen as an example of the Quran's use of numbers in daily life, linking the physical act of prayer with a mathematical pattern, potentially illustrating the balance and symmetry in Islamic rituals. 1. Chapter 9 at Tawbah, verse division How. Chapter 9 has 129 verses split into 29 and 100 verses. Why? The first 29 verses address wartime policies, distinct from the rest of the chapter, which might relate to different historical contexts or legal rulings. Calculation. Total verses equals sine 129, first segment equals sine 29, second segment equals sine 129 minus 29 equals 100, digit sum of 129, 1 plus 2 plus 9 equals 12, digit sum of 93, 9 plus 3 equals 12. Implication. The division might symbolize a complete cycle or a year in the lunar calendar, 29 days per month, roughly 12 months, suggesting a thematic or structural completeness. The matching digit sums could imply a deeper connection between chapters 9 and 27, perhaps in terms of divine order or thematic continuity. 1. Number 29 and chapter 27, An-Naml. How? There are exactly 29 verses between the two Bismillahs in chapter 27. Why this might be seen as marking a significant transition or completion within the narrative or thematic structure of the chapter. Calculation. Verses between Bismillahs 27, 1 to 27 divided 29 equals 29 verses. Implication. This could symbolize the end of one discourse and the beginning of another, mirroring the lunar month cycle or the idea of transition in human life or spiritual journey. 1. Mathematical relationship between 93 and 129. How 93 equals sine 343, where 43 is prime. Why? To highlight the mathematical connection or pattern between these two chapters. Calculation. 93 minus 29 equals 64, 8 squared. 129 minus 29 equals 100, 10 squared. Sum of consecutive numbers, 93 equal sine 13 plus 14 plus 15 plus 16 plus 17 plus 18, 129 equals sine 19 plus 20 plus 21 plus 22 plus 23 plus 24 generating function. 3 n1 plus 3 for n equals sine 6. We get 93 for n equals sine 7. We get 129 implication. The use of prime numbers and their multiplication by 3 could symbolize indivisibility or purity in spiritual matters, or the completeness of God's message. The pattern of consecutive numbers might signify continuity or progression in the message or the divine plan. The generating function might suggest an underlying mathematical order to the Quran's structure, perhaps hinting at the notion of a divine mathematical language or code. 1. Digit sum and number properties. How? Digit sum of 9 equals sine 9, digit sum of 27 equals sine 2 plus 7 equals 9y. To show a numerical relationship between these chapter numbers. Calculation. 9 equals sine 3 squared, 27 equals sine 3 cubed. Implication. This could be interpreted as a sign of divine symmetry or balance within the text. The square and cube of 3 might also symbolize the Trinity or triadic nature in Islamic theology. For example, the 3 aspects of faith, Islam, Iman, Ihsan, or the stages of spiritual development, knowledge, action, and wisdom. These calculations and their implications provide a lens through which one might view the Quran not just as a religious text, but also as a mathematical testament to its divine origin, assuming one ascribes to the belief that such patterns are intentional and part of its miraculous nature. However, this approach should be complemented by traditional exegesis to avoid interpretations that might stray from the Quran's core messages. Continue answer. Let's continue with additional numerical explorations and their implications. 1. Verse 29 of chapter 9. How verse 29 in chapter 9 is noted for having exactly 29 words. Why? This precise number might be seen as reinforcing the significance of the number 29 in this context. Calculation. Words in verse 9 divided 29 equals 29. Implication. The exact match of the verse number with the word count could be interpreted as a marker for emphasis or a special significance, perhaps indicating the verse's pivotal role in the chapter's narrative or legal rulings. It might also tie into the broader theme of the number 29, representing completeness, transition, or a divine signature. 1. Number 29 in relation to Chapter 1, Al-Fatihah. How? Al-Fatihah contains 29 words, matching the number of words in verse 929. Why? This connection might suggest a thematic or structural link between the opening chapter and specific verses in later chapters, emphasizing unity in the Quranic text. Calculation: words in Al-Fatihah equal sign 29. Implication: the repetition of this number could be seen as a sign of the Quran's harmonious structure, where the beginning and certain pivotal points in later chapters echo each other numerically, possibly symbolizing the oneness of the message or the divine source. 1. Mathematical patterns in chapter numbers and verses. How? Exploring the sum of chapter numbers 1, 9, 27 and the difference in their verse counts. Why? To find mathematical coherence or patterns that might reflect on the divine order or the intentional design of the text. Calculation: sum of chapter numbers 1 plus 9 plus 27 equals 37, though the video mentions 36. This might be an error or interpretation. Difference in verse counts: chapter 1 has 7 verses, chapter 9 has 129 verses, chapter 27 has 93 verses. Difference between 27 and 9 in terms of verse count: 93, 129 equals sign minus 36, absolute value 36. Difference between 1 and 9 divided 129 to 7 equals 122, not directly relevant to 36. Implication: if we consider the sum to be 36, this might align with the lunar cycle, 360 degrees in a circle with 10 degrees per day in the lunar calendar. Roughly, the consistency in these numbers might be viewed as part of the Quran's mathematical miracle, suggesting a deliberate structure or pattern intended to convey deeper meanings or the unity of creation. 1. The role of prime numbers. How? Using prime numbers in calculations, for example, 31 and 43 for 93 and 129. Why? Prime numbers are indivisible except by one in themselves, often seen as symbols of purity, uniqueness, or divine simplicity in numerological interpretations. Calculation: 93 equals sign 343. Implication: the use of prime numbers could symbolize the indivisible truth or the purity of the Quranic message. The factor of 3 might also connect to the concept of Trinity in Islamic theology, or the 3 dimensions of faith: knowledge, action, and sincerity. 1. Mathematical symmetry and completeness. How? Highlighting how numbers like 9 and 27 relate through squares and cubes of 3. Why? To demonstrate a mathematical symmetry or balance within the Quran that might reflect on the divine perfection. Calculation: 9 equals sign 3, squared 27 equals sign 3 cubed. Implication: this symmetry could be interpreted as a sign of the Quran's divine authorship, where even the structure of the text reflects the harmony and order of the universe or the unity of God's message. These calculations and their interpretations delve into the idea that the Quran has layers of meaning, including numerical ones, which might not only serve as a means of memorization or aesthetic appreciation, but also as an expression of the divine intellect and order. However, such interpretations should be approached with caution, ensuring they do not overshadow or distort the primary, literal, and spiritual messages of the Quran. Continue answer. Let's delve into further numerical explorations and their implications. 1. The significance of number 9. How? Number 9 is explored for its mathematical properties and its recurrence in chapter numbers and verse counts. Why? In numerology, 9 can symbolize completion, enlightenment, or the culmination of cycles, as it's the highest single-digit number. Calculation: digit sum of 9 equals sign 99 equals sign 3 squared, linking back to the theme of divine trinity or completion through the number 3. Implication: the frequent appearance and mathematical significance of 9 might suggest the Quran's message as the ultimate revelation or the completion of divine guidance. This could align with the Islamic belief that the Quran is the final testament. 1. The cube and square relationship. How the relationship between 9, 3 squared, and 27, 3 cubed, is highlighted. Why? This might reflect a progression or deepening of knowledge or faith from square, 2D, to cube, 3D, symbolizing growth or the spread of the message into all dimensions of life. Calculation: 9 equals sign 33 asterisk 3. Implication: this could be interpreted as a metaphor for the Quran's teachings expanding from basic principles to complex, all-encompassing guidance, or from individual faith to a community and universal application. 1. Number 29's mathematical relationships. How? 29's relationship to other numbers through subtraction or division. Why? To emphasize the number's role in creating or highlighting patterns within the text. Calculation: 129 minus 29 equals 100, a 10 squared. 93 minus 29 equals 64, 8 squared. If chapter 9 has 29 secret codes at the start of 29 chapters, this might link to the concept of 29 being a prime number, symbolizing something unique or foundational. Implication: the subtraction, creating perfect squares, could symbolize balance or harmony in the Quranic structure, where each part complements the other. The prime nature of 29 might reflect on the indivisible, fundamental truths of the Quran. 1. The consecutive number sequence. How? Summing consecutive numbers to get chapter-verse counts. Why? This might illustrate a narrative or structural progression within the Quran, where each part builds on the previous. Calculation: 93 equals sign 13 plus 14 plus 15 plus 16 plus 17 plus 18, 129. Equals sign 19 plus 20 plus 21 plus 22 plus 23 plus 24. Implication: this could symbolize how each part of the Quran adds to the understanding or narrative, building from simpler to more complex concepts or from individual to collective responsibilities. 1. Number of verses and words in relation to chapter numbers. How? Examining the correlation between the number of verses, words, and chapter numbers. Why? To find a pattern or symmetry that might reflect divine intentionality. Calculation: Chapter 1, 7 verses, 29 words. Chapter 9, 129 verses with verse 29 having 29 words. Chapter 27, 93 verses with a special mention of 29 verses between two bismillahs. Implication: this might suggest that the structure of the Quran is not random but follows a divine pattern where numbers and words are meticulously chosen to convey deeper layers of meaning, perhaps echoing the idea that every aspect of creation has purpose and design. Conclusion: these mathematical insights into the Quran can lead to a profound appreciation of the text's complexity and depth, suggesting a multi-layered narrative where numbers serve as both a mnemonic device and a symbol of divine craftsmanship. However, while these patterns are fascinating, they should be viewed as supplementary to the Quran's primary purpose of guidance, moral instruction, and spiritual enlightenment. The balance between this numerical fascination and the core messages of faith, ethics, and law in Islam must be maintained to ensure that interpretations remain within the bounds of sound exegesis. Continue answer here. We'll continue exploring additional numerical insights and their potential implications. 1. Pattern of 29 and its multiples. How? Looking at how 29 appears in a broader context, not just in specific chapters, but potentially across the Quran. Why? To see if there's a recurring theme or structural significance beyond the noted chapters. Calculation: if we consider the number of occurrences of 29 in various contexts, like verses, words, or chapter numbers, we might look for patterns. Number of chapters beginning with 29 letters or words. Instances where 29 is a significant number in other verses or surahs. Implication: the prevalence of 29 might indicate a theme of completion or transition throughout the Quran, possibly symbolizing the end of one narrative arc and the beginning of another, or the idea of divine perfection in stages or cycles. 1. Mathematical symmetry in chapter lengths. How? Comparing the lengths of chapters around significant numbers, like 9, 27, or 29. Why? To explore if there's a symmetrical arrangement that could reflect divine order. Calculation: examine the verse count of chapters immediately before and after those highlighted, 9 and 27. Before chapter 9, chapter 8 has 75 verses. After chapter 9, chapter 10 has 109 verses. Before chapter 27, chapter 26 has 227 verses, matching the second largest chapter mentioned. After chapter 27, chapter 28 has 88 verses. Implication: this symmetry could suggest a deliberate structuring of the Quran, where chapters are not only arranged for thematic reasons, but also for numerical balance, possibly indicating the Quran's role as a perfectly composed scripture. 1. Number of words in key verses. How? counting words in verses that are pivotal or frequently cited. Why? To see if there's a pattern in the length of verses that corresponds with their significance or thematic content. Calculation, for instance, verse 929, mentioned for its legal significance, has 29 words. Other verses known for their importance might be analyzed similarly. Implication: the correlation between the importance of a verse and its word count could suggest an underlying message about the precision of divine speech or the weight of each word in significant rulings or teachings. 1. The number 3 and its multiples. How? Exploring the significance of 3 and its multiples in the Quran's structure or content. Why? 3 has symbolic importance in many cultures, often representing completeness, the divine or the trinity of faith in Islam. Calculation: look at instances where 3 or its multiples appear, the number of rakats for prayers, the frequency of certain words or phrases in multiples of 3. Structural elements like the 3 major aspects of Islamic faith: Islam, Iman, Ihsan. Implication: this could reinforce the idea of divine completeness or the triadic nature of many Islamic concepts, suggesting a holistic approach to faith where knowledge, practice, and spirituality are intertwined. 1. Reflection on mathematical coincidence versus design. How? Considering how one might differentiate between coincidence and intentional design in the Quran's numbers. Why? To address skeptics or provide a framework for believers to understand these patterns. Calculation: statistical analysis might be employed to determine the likelihood of these patterns occurring by chance versus by design, though such analysis would be speculative without direct Quranic scholarship. Implication: for believers, these patterns might serve as a testament to the Quran's miraculous nature, while for scholars it opens a dialogue about the intersection of faith, text, and mathematics. It highlights the need for a nuanced approach where numerical patterns are seen as part of the Quranic miracle, but not the sole basis of its divinity. Conclusion: this exploration into the numerical aspects of the Quran shows how numbers can be seen as part of its miraculous nature, offering layers of meaning that might resonate with believers on a mathematical, aesthetic, or spiritual level. However, the interpretations of these numbers should always be grounded in the broader context of Quranic scholarship, ensuring that they enhance rather than distract from the primary message of the Quran. The balance between numerological fascination and the text's literal and spiritual teachings is crucial. Continue answer. Here we continue to explore the numerical intricacies of the Quran, looking at more detailed aspects and their potential implications. 1. The number 7 and its significance. How? Examining the number 7 and its multiples in the Quran, given its symbolic importance in many religious contexts, including Islam. Why? 7 is often associated with perfection, completion, or divine order. For example, the 7 heavens, 7 days of creation in Abrahamic traditions. Calculation: number of verses in Al-Fatihah. 7 number of times certain phrases or words appear in multiples of 7. The number of verses in some chapters or the number of occurrences of certain themes. Implication: the recurrence of 7 might symbolize divine completeness or the perfection of the Quranic message, aligning with the broader Islamic concept of the universe structured in 7s. 1. Mathematical connections between chapters. How? Investigating if there are mathematical relationships between the lengths of chapters or their placement in the Quran. Why? To uncover potential deeper connections or a deliberate structure that might reflect divine wisdom. Calculation: look for patterns in the number of verses, comparing the sum of verses in consecutive chapters or those sharing themes. Analyzing the sequence of chapter lengths for any recurring patterns or mathematical relationships. Implication: such connections could imply a systematic approach to the Quran's arrangement, where each chapter not only follows a thematic narrative but also a numerical one, enhancing the view of the Quran as a perfectly ordered divine revelation. 1. The role of prime numbers beyond 29. How? Extending the analysis to other prime numbers that appear in chapter numbers or verse counts. Why prime numbers, by their nature, could symbolize the indivisibility or purity of divine messages or truths. Calculation: identify other prime numbers in significant contexts. Chapter numbers like 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, 19, etc. Verse counts that are prime. Implication: The use of primes could be seen as an indication of the Quran's uniqueness and the indivisibility of its message, where each part is essential and cannot be broken down further without losing its essence. 1. Mathematical representation of key Islamic concepts. How? Exploring how numbers might represent or symbolize key Islamic concepts or events. Why? To see if there's a numerical dimension to the theological or historical aspects of Islam. Calculation, number of times, key terms like Allah, Rahman, Rahim, or significant events like the Hajj are mentioned. The mathematical symbolism of numbers linked to prophets, prayers, or fasting. Implication. This could illustrate how the Quran's text intertwines with Islamic theology and practice, potentially showing that divine guidance is reflected not only in words, but in the very structure of the text. 1. The Fibonacci sequence or other mathematical sequences. How? Checking if sequences like Fibonacci or others appear within the Quran's text or structure. Why? These sequences are often associated with natural growth patterns, which could symbolize the organic, living nature of the Quranic message. Calculation. Look for patterns in chapter lengths, verse counts, or word counts that follow any known mathematical sequences. Implication. If present, this might suggest a universal aspect to the Quran's structure where it reflects natural laws or divine creation's patterns, emphasizing the Quran's role as a book of guidance for all aspects of life. 1. Reflecting on numerical patterns in exegesis. How? Considering how traditional exegesis might view or utilize these numerical patterns. Why? To ensure interpretations are aligned with scholarly consensus and Islamic principles. Calculation. Comparing historical tafsir, Quranic exegesis, with these numerical insights to see if there's acknowledgement or use of such patterns in traditional interpretations. Implication. This reflection ensures that while numerological insights can be fascinating, they must complement, not contradict, the traditional understanding of Quranic verses. It encourages a holistic approach where numbers are one aspect of the Quran's miraculous nature, but not the sole determinant of its divine origin or interpretation. Conclusion. This deep dive into the numbers within the Quran illustrates how they might serve as another dimension of its miraculous nature, offering both scholars and believers new lenses through which to appreciate the text's depth. However, all interpretations must be handled with care to maintain the integrity of the Quranic message, ensuring that numerical fascination does not overshadow the spiritual, moral, and legal guidance the Quran provides. Continue answer. Continuing our exploration into the numerical aspects of the Quran. 1. The number 19 and its mathematical significance. How? Examining the number 19, which has been a subject of much discussion due to its patterns in the Quran. Why? Some theories suggest that 19 has a special mathematical significance within the Quran, often linked to the work of Rashad Khalifa, who proposed the Quran's mathematical code based around this number. Calculation. Examples include the number of letters in specific verses like 74, 30, which supposedly has 19 letters, the frequency of certain words or phrases appearing in multiples of 19. Implication, the number 19 could be seen as a testament to the Quran's mathematical structure, potentially symbolizing divine order or a safeguard against textual corruption. However, this interpretation is controversial, and mainstream Islamic scholarship often views these claims with skepticism, emphasizing the need for traditional exegesis over numerological interpretations. 1. Number of times words or phrases appear. How? Counting the frequency of key words or phrases like Allah, Muhammad, Quran, or prayers like Alhamdulillah. Why? To explore if there's a numeric pattern in how often certain concepts are emphasized. Calculation, for instance, analyzing how many times Allah appears in relation to other key terms or in specific contexts, like in different chapters or sections. Implication. This analysis might suggest an intentional emphasis on certain themes or attributes of God, providing insight into the Quran's method of teaching or prioritizing its lessons. 1. Mathematical patterns in Quranic miracles. How? Looking at numbers associated with miracles or significant events mentioned in the Quran. Why? To understand if there's a numerical aspect to how these miracles are presented or described. Calculation. Examples might include the number of people saved in the story of Noah's Ark, the The duration of certain events, like the stay of Yusuf Joseph in prison. Implication: these numbers could underscore the miraculous nature of the events, providing another layer of appreciation for the Quran's recounting of divine interventions or teachings. 1. The use of symmetry in surah structure. How? Exploring if there's symmetry in the structure of surahs, particularly between the beginning and end. Why? Symmetry might reflect a literary or structural beauty indicative of divine authorship. Calculation: analyzing the number of verses, words, or even thematic elements that mirror each other from the start to the end of chapters. Implication: such symmetry could be interpreted as an artistic or divine signature, where the Quran's message is not only coherent but also aesthetically pleasing in its composition, echoing the balance found in nature and divine creation. 1. The significance of odd and even numbers. How? Investigating whether there's a pattern in the use of odd versus even numbers in verses or chapter lengths. Why, in many cultures, odd numbers can symbolize uniqueness or divinity, while even numbers might represent completeness or balance. Calculation: counting verses or chapters that are odd, or even to see if they correlate with thematic content or placement. Implication: this might suggest a subtle way in which the Quran communicates concepts like the uniqueness of God, odd, or the balance of His creation, even, though such interpretations would need to be considered within the broader context of Islamic theology. 1. Mathematical reflection on revelation order. How? Analyzing the mathematical implications of the order in which chapters were revealed versus their placement in the compiled Quran. Why? To see if there's an underlying pattern or purpose in the narrative or legal development of the Quran. Calculation: comparing the chapter lengths or thematic content based on revelation order versus their final placement. Implication: this could highlight how divine wisdom encompasses both the immediate context of revelation and the timeless arrangement of the text, suggesting a dynamic yet cohesive message meant for all times. Conclusion: exploring the numerical dimensions of the Quran provides a fascinating perspective on its text, potentially revealing layers of meaning that resonate with believers through the universal language of mathematics. However, these numerical insights should be approached with a balanced perspective, ensuring they support rather than overshadow the Quran's primary teachings. The diversity of interpretations, especially concerning numerology, underscores the importance of grounding such analyses in traditional scholarship to maintain the integrity and focus of the Quranic message on guidance, morality, and faith. Continuing our delve into the numerical aspects of the Quran. 1. The number 40 and its symbolism. How? Examining the significance of the number 40, which appears in several Quranic narratives. Why? 40 is often symbolic of trial, testing, or a period of significant transition in religious texts. Calculation: examples include Moses spending 40 days on Mount Sinai, the flood lasting 40 days, the number 40 appearing in contexts of repentance or divine trial. Implication: the recurrence of 40 might symbolize patience, purification, or the completion of a spiritual journey, reflecting the Quran's emphasis on perseverance and the transformative power of divine guidance. 1. Mathematical patterns in repetitions. How? Looking at the repetition of verses or phrases and whether there's a mathematical logic to these repetitions. Why? Repetitions in religious texts often serve to emphasize key teachings or to aid in memorization. Calculation: counting how many times certain verses or parts of verses are repeated, like the Basmala, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, or the phrase Alhamdulillah. Implication: the mathematical pattern in repetitions could highlight the Quran's method of teaching, where emphasis on certain aspects of faith or morality is underscored by their frequency, potentially aiding in the internalization of these principles. 1. The golden ratio in Quranic structure. How? Investigating if the Quran's structure or content reflects the golden ratio, approximately 1.618. Why? The golden ratio is found in nature and art, often associated with beauty and balance, which might reflect divine harmony. Calculation: comparing the lengths of chapters, verses, or sections to see if they approximate this ratio or if key verses appear at points that align with this proportion. Implication: if present, this could be interpreted as another layer of the Quran's miraculous nature, where its structure mirrors the aesthetic and natural balance found in creation, suggesting an artistic or divine signature. 1. Number of divine names and their occurrences. How counting and analyzing the names of Allah and their frequency in the Quran. Why the names of God are central to Islamic theology, each representing a different aspect of the divine. Calculation, examining how often each of the 99 names of Allah appears and if there's any mathematical pattern or significance in their distribution. Implication. This could provide insight into the theological emphasis on different attributes of God, possibly revealing a balanced representation of divine characteristics throughout the Quran. 1. Symmetry in Quranic verses. How? Exploring symmetry not just in chapter length, but within individual verses or pairs of verses. Why? Symmetry might indicate a poetic or rhetorical device aimed at emphasizing the beauty or profundity of the message. Calculation. Looking at verses or parts of verses that mirror each other in structure or content, like rhyming patterns or mirrored phrases. Implication. This symmetry might be seen as a sign of the Quran's linguistic miracle, where the beauty of the language and structure serves as a testament to its divine origin, making the message both compelling and memorable. 1. The role of zero and infinity. How? Considering the conceptual presence or absence of zero and infinity in Quranic numerology. Why zero can symbolize nothingness or the void before creation, while infinity might represent God's limitless nature. Calculation. Reflecting on how these concepts might be implicitly represented through the absence or presence of certain numbers or through descriptions of divine attributes. Implication. Such a contemplation could lead to a deeper understanding of Islamic theology concerning creation, the nature of God, and the human condition within the finite and infinite. 1. Mathematical significance in prayer times. How? Analyzing how the times of prayer, salah, are mathematically structured throughout the day. Why the timing of prayers links to both the natural day-night cycle and the mathematical division of time. Calculation, looking at how prayer times correlate with solar and lunar movements and how they divide the day into segments. Implication, this could underscore the integration of worship with the natural order, emphasizing Islam's holistic approach where worship aligns with the cosmos, symbolizing harmony between human life and divine creation. Conclusion. The exploration of numbers within the Quran opens up a vast field for reflection on its divine origin, structure, and teachings. However, while these numerical patterns can be seen as part of the Quran's multifaceted miracle, they must be understood alongside its explicit teachings. The balance between numerological fascination and theological depth ensures that these insights enhance rather than obscure the core messages of faith, guidance, and moral living that the Quran imparts. Continue answer. Continuing our exploration into the numerical dimensions of the Quran. 1. The number 1 in Quranic context. How analyzing the significance of the number 1, which symbolizes unity, particularly in relation to the oneness of God, Tawheed. Why? The concept of oneness is central to Islamic theology, emphasizing the singularity of God. Calculation, counting references to the oneness of Allah, or when the number 1 appears in significant contexts. Implication. The number 1 could be seen as a constant reminder of the core Islamic belief in the absolute oneness of God, both in the metaphysical and in the practical aspects of worship. 1. Numerical patterns in legal verses. How? Examining if there are numerical patterns in verses dealing with legal rulings or ethical guidance. Why? To see if there's a mathematical aspect to how laws or moral teachings are presented. Calculation. Look for patterns in the number of verses on specific topics like inheritance, fasting, or charity. Implication. Such patterns might suggest a divine method in the structuring of legal and moral guidance, ensuring clarity and memorability, or perhaps symbolizing the balance and fairness inherent in Islamic law. 1. The number 1001 and beyond. How? Considering the significance of larger numbers like 1001, which appears in narratives like the story of the Companions of the Cave, Surah Al-Kahf. Why? Larger numbers often symbolize vastness, mystery, or the unknown. Calculation, investigating how often large numbers are used and in what context, particularly in stories or parables. Implication, these numbers might symbolize the incomprehensible scope of divine wisdom or the mysteries of faith, inviting contemplation on the infinite aspects of God's knowledge and power. 1. The use of fractions in the Quran. How? Looking for instances where fractions or proportions are mentioned, like in inheritance laws. Why? Fractions can represent justice, equity, or the precise division of responsibilities and rights. Calculation. Analyzing verses where parts of a whole are discussed, like the division of inheritance, for example, 1/2, 1/3. Implication. This could emphasize the Quran's concern with justice and fairness, where even the smallest part is accounted for, reflecting the meticulous nature of divine law. 1. Mathematical patterns in Quranic recitations, tajweed. How? Exploring if there's a mathematical rhythm or pattern in the recitation rules of tajweed. Why? Tajweed has precise rules for pronunciation, which might follow a pattern that aids in memorization or enhances the beauty of recitation. Calculation. Examining the duration of sounds, the number of beats for certain letters, or the rhythm of verses in relation to tajweed rules. Implication. This might suggest that the Quran's auditory aspect is designed to resonate with a mathematical harmony, making the recitation not only a spiritual act but also an artistic and scientific one. 1. Number as a tool for memorization. How? Considering how the numerical structure or patterns might aid in the memorization of the Quran. Why? The Quran's memorization, hifz, is a significant aspect of Islamic culture, and numbers could play a role in this process. Calculation. Looking at how the numerical length of verses or chapters might facilitate learning by providing a cognitive framework. Implication. This could indicate that the Quran's structure is tailored to human cognitive processes, making the act of memorization not only possible but also profound, aligning with the oral tradition of its preservation. 1. The mathematical aspect of miracles. How? Revisiting miracles from a numerical standpoint, like the splitting of the moon or the number of people in the cave. Why? Miracles often have numerical components that could be symbolic or literal. Calculation. Quantifying aspects of miracles where numbers are involved, like the duration of events or the number of participants. Implication. Numbers in these contexts might serve to underscore the miraculous nature of events, providing a concrete measure to the extraordinary, thus making the divine intervention more tangible or relatable. 1. Reflection on the mathematical versus the spiritual. How? Contemplating the balance between exploring the Quran's numerical aspects and maintaining focus on its spiritual guidance. Why? To ensure that the emphasis on numbers doesn't detract from the Quran's primary purpose as a guide for life and morality. Calculation. This is more philosophical but involves assessing how much focus should be placed on numerology versus traditional exegesis. Implication. This reflection underscores the need for a holistic approach to Quranic study, where numerical insights are seen as supplementary, enhancing the spiritual journey rather than defining it. Conclusion. The numerical exploration of the Quran provides another dimension through which its miraculous nature can be appreciated. However, these insights must be integrated with the Quran's teachings on faith, ethics, and jurisprudence. The danger lies in reducing the Quran to mere numbers, thus missing its profound spiritual and moral guidance. The true miracle of the Quran remains in its timeless message, its literary beauty, and its ability to transform lives, with numbers offering one of many lenses to view this vast ocean of wisdom. Conclusion. Answer. Conclusion. The journey through the numerical dimensions of the Quran reveals a fascinating aspect of this sacred text, where mathematics serves as both a tool for understanding its structure and a reflection of its miraculous nature. Numbers in the Quran, from simple counts like the daily prayers rakats to complex patterns involving prime numbers, sequences, and even potential reflections of the golden ratio, suggest a layered approach to divine revelation. These patterns might indicate divine order and harmony. The presence of mathematical patterns could be seen as a testament to the Quran's divine origin, showcasing a harmony in its structure akin to the harmony in the natural world. Aid in memorization and understanding. The numerical aspects might also facilitate the memorization of the text, an essential practice in Islamic tradition, and provide cognitive frameworks for deeper understanding. Symbolic representation. Numbers often carry symbolic weight, emphasizing key theological concepts like the oneness of God, the cycle of life and death, or the balance of justice. However, this exploration must be approached with balance, complementarity to spiritual and moral guidance. While numerical analysis can enhance appreciation, it should not overshadow the Quran's primary roles as a source of spiritual guidance, moral instruction, and legal rulings. The numbers are part of its miracle, but not the entirety. Avoidance of numerological excess. There's a risk in focusing too heavily on numerology, potentially leading to interpretations that stray from the Quran's explicit teachings or the consensus of traditional scholarship. The Quran itself cautions against following conjecture or unsubstantiated theories. Integration with traditional exegesis. Any numerical insight should be considered alongside classical interpretations, tafsir, to ensure that the spiritual, moral, and legal messages of the Quran are not lost in the fascination with numbers. Emphasis on the text's universality. The Quran's universality lies not just in its numbers, but in its timeless message, speaking to all aspects of human life across cultures and ages. Its numerical patterns are one of many miracles, alongside its linguistic beauty, ethical teachings, and the transformative impact it has on individuals and societies. In conclusion, while the numerical aspects of the Quran offer a unique perspective on its divine nature, they should be seen as enhancing rather than defining the Quranic experience. The true miracle of the Quran encompasses its ability to guide, its profound influence on human civilization, and its role in fostering a deep personal connection with the divine. Numbers are but one thread in the rich tapestry of this sacred text, inviting believers to marvel at the complexity and beauty of revelation, while never losing sight of the Quran's essence as a beacon for humanity. Quranic numerology answer. Quranic numerology, an overview. Quranic numerology involves the study of numbers within the Quran to uncover patterns, meanings, or hidden messages that might not be apparent through traditional exegesis. Here's a comprehensive look at this subject. Historical context, traditional scholarship. Historically, Islamic scholars have focused on the Quran's linguistic beauty, legal rulings, moral guidance, and theological discourse. Numerology, while not central, has been a part of Islamic mysticism, particularly in Sufi traditions where numbers are often seen as symbols of divine truths. Modern interpretations. In more recent times, with the advent of computational tools, some have explored the Quran through numerology, sometimes leading to controversial claims about numeric codes or patterns. Key aspects of Quranic numerology number symbolism. 1. Represents the oneness of God, Tawheed. 7. Symbolizes completion or perfection, often linked to the 7 heavens, days of creation, etc. 19. Notable due to Rashad Khalifa's theory of Code 19, suggesting a mathematical structure to the Quran, though this is widely debated. 40. Represents a period of trial or transformation, seen in stories like Moses on Mount Sinai. Patterns and repetitions, the frequency of certain words like Allah, Rahman, or phrases, looking for patterns in their occurrence which might reflect emphasis or thematic importance. Chapter and verse counts, analyzing how the number of verses in a chapter might correlate with its content or position in the Quran, or how chapters are arranged. Mathematical relationships, looking for prime numbers, Fibonacci sequences, or other mathematical relationships in the structure of the Quran's text or in significant events described within it. Miracles and events. Numbers associated with Quranic narratives or miracles, like the number of sleepers in the cave, Al-Kahf, or the duration of the flood. Controversies and criticisms, orthodoxy versus numerology. Traditional Islamic scholarship often views the overemphasis on numerology with caution, warning against interpretations that might lead away from the Quran's primary messages or into superstition. Rashad Khalifa's claims. Perhaps the most famous example of Quranic numerology, his theory about the number 19, led to significant debate and skepticism within the Islamic community, with many scholars rejecting his interpretations as baseless. Risk of misinterpretation. There's a danger that numerological fascination could overshadow the Quran's literal, ethical, and spiritual teachings, leading to misinterpretation or diversion from its core guidance. Applications and reflections memorization aid. Some believe that numerical patterns can assist in memorizing the Quran, providing a cognitive structure. Spiritual insights. For some, numerology offers a deeper appreciation of the Quran's miraculous nature, seeing numbers as another dimension of its divine origin. Cultural and artistic expression. In Islamic art and architecture, numbers often play a role in symmetry and design, reflecting an appreciation for the numeric beauty in the Quran. Conclusion. Quranic numerology, while intriguing, should be approached with caution. Supplementary, not central. It should serve as a supplementary tool to traditional exegesis, enhancing but never replacing the Quran's primary role as a guide for life. balance and scholarship. Any exploration of numbers in the Quran must be balanced with sound scholarship, ensuring that interpretations align with Islamic theology and the consensus of classical tafsir. Spiritual and moral focus. The ultimate aim of engaging with the Quran should always be spiritual growth, ethical living, and understanding of divine law, where numerology is just one small part of a much larger picture. In essence, while Quranic numerology can offer insights into the text's depth and complexity, it's crucial to maintain focus on the Quran's explicit teachings and its role in guiding humanity towards righteousness and understanding of the divine. Sufi interpretations of Numbers 25 web pages. Sufi interpretations of numbers in Sufism, which is the mystical dimension of Islam. Numbers are often imbued with deeper symbolic meanings that go beyond their numerical value to represent spiritual truths, stages of spiritual development, or aspects of the divine nature. Here's how numbers are interpreted within various Sufi traditions. General principles. Symbolism over literalism. Sufis often see numbers as symbols of spiritual states or divine attributes rather than just quantities. Unity and multiplicity. There's a focus on how numbers reflect the unity of God, Tawheed, and the multiplicity of His manifestations in creation. Journey of the soul. Numbers can represent the stages or stations, maqamat, through which the soul must pass to achieve spiritual enlightenment. Specific interpretations of numbers 1 symbolizes the absolute unity of God. In Sufi thought, everything in existence is a manifestation of this divine oneness. Represents the starting point of all spiritual journeys, the singularity from which all multiplicity arises. 2 often symbolizes duality, like the relationship between God and creation, or the inner and outer self. Can also denote the concepts of love and separation, where the two are seen as aspects of the same reality. 3 represents the trinity of faith in Islam, submission, Iman, faith, and Ihsan, excellence in worship. Symbolizes the three dimensions of human existence, body, mind, and spirit, or the three aspects of divine unity, the essence, attributes, and acts. 4 reflects the four states of consciousness, or the four elements in Sufi cosmology, symbolizing balance and the physical world. Can also represent the four rivers of paradise, or the four caliphs, emphasizing foundational aspects of faith or governance. 5 linked to the 5 daily prayers, Salah, which symbolize the 5 pillars of Islam, representing completeness in worship. Can also signify the 5 senses through which humans perceive the world, urging control over them for spiritual purification. 7 considered a number of perfection or completion, like the 7 heavens, 7 days of creation, or the 7 verses of Al-Fatihah. Represents the 7 stages of spiritual ascent, or the 7 levels of the soul's purification. 9 symbolizes completion or the end of a cycle, as it's the highest single-digit number. It's often associated with the concept of fana, annihilation in God, in Sufism. Can represent the 9 points of the Naqshbandi spiritual path, or the 9 levels of spiritual awareness. 19. While less commonly discussed in traditional Sufism, in some modern interpretations, 19 might be linked to spiritual mysteries, especially after Rashid Khalifa's work, though with caution due to its controversial nature. 40 symbolizes a significant period of trial, transformation, or spiritual retreat, known in Sufism for the chilla, a 40-day period of intense spiritual practice. Practical applications in Sufism. Dhikr, remembrance. Sufis might use numbers in the practice of dhikr, where certain divine names or phrases are repeated a specific number of times to align with spiritual states or to achieve certain spiritual effects. Spiritual education. Numbers are used to guide students through the spiritual path, with each number representing a lesson or stage to be mastered. Symbolic literature and poetry. Sufi poetry often employs numbers symbolically to convey spiritual insights, like Rumi's use of numbers in his poetry to represent divine love or the soul's journey. Critiques and considerations. Orthodoxy versus mysticism. While numerology can enrich spiritual practice, some Orthodox scholars might caution against overemphasizing it, fearing it could lead to deviations from core Islamic teachings. Balance. Sufis themselves stress the importance of balancing numerical symbolism with the Quran's literal and ethical guidance, ensuring that numbers serve as tools for spiritual insight rather than becoming ends in themselves. In summary, Sufi interpretations of numbers provide a layer of mystical understanding to Islamic spirituality, where numbers are not merely mathematical but are seen as keys to unlocking deeper spiritual realities and truths. Sufi poetry and symbolism. Answer: Sufi poetry and symbolism. Sufi poetry is renowned for its rich use of symbolism, metaphor, and allegory to convey the complexities of the spiritual journey, the nature of divine love, and the quest for unity with the divine. Here's an exploration of how Sufi poets employ symbolism. Key symbols in Sufi poetry: the beloved, God, often symbolized by terms like friend, beloved, or lover. In the poetry of Rumi, Hafez, and others, the relationship between the poet and the beloved mirrors the soul's longing for union with the divine. The tavern wine, the tavern symbolizes the spiritual gathering place, and wine represents divine love or spiritual intoxication, leading to the loss of the self-ego in the presence of God. This is metaphorically used to describe spiritual ecstasy or enlightenment. The drunkard represents the Sufi who has become intoxicated by divine love, losing themselves in the spiritual experience, which signifies moving beyond worldly concerns to spiritual awareness. The mirror, a symbol for self-reflection and the soul's quest to see the divine within. It also represents the idea that the divine can be seen in all of creation as a reflection of God's beauty. The nightingale and the rose. The nightingale's song for the rose symbolizes the soul's yearning for divine beauty, or the lover's lament for the beloved. The rose often represents the divine or the beauty of God's creation, the journey. Life is seen as a journey towards God, with various stages symbolized by different landscapes like deserts, trials, mountains, ascent towards God, or oceans, the vastness of divine love. Light and darkness. Light often symbolizes divine knowledge, guidance, or the presence of God, while darkness can represent ignorance, the ego, or distance from the divine. The reed flute, ney. As famously used by Rumi in his opening to the Mathnawi, the reed flute symbolizes the human soul, separated from its origin, longing to return to God. Its music is the soul's cry for reunion. Water and thirst. Thirst symbolizes the soul's yearning for God, and water represents divine knowledge, love, or mercy that quenches this spiritual thirst. The veil represents the barriers, often ego or material desires, that separate the human from experiencing the divine directly. Unveiling symbolizes spiritual insight or union. Sufi poets and their use of symbolism. Rumi, Jalaluddin Rumi. His poetry is filled with symbols of love, longing, and spiritual journey. The Masnavi uses stories and metaphors to teach spiritual lessons, where every element can have a mystical interpretation. Hafez. Known for his ghazals, Hafez often uses wine, the tavern, and the beloved in a way that blurs the line between earthly love and divine love, encouraging readers to seek beneath the surface for spiritual meaning. Ibn Arabi. His poetry delves into the concept of wadat al-wujud, unity of being, where symbols like mirrors or light are used to explain the oneness of God and creation. Atar of Nishapur. In works like The Conference of the Birds, the journey of the birds to find the simag is a metaphor for the soul's journey to God, with each bird representing different human qualities or spiritual stages. Purpose and impact. Spiritual education. Through allegory and metaphor, Sufi poetry makes complex theological and spiritual concepts accessible and engaging, guiding the seeker on their spiritual path. Emotional connection. It creates an emotional resonance with the reader or listener, stirring the heart towards divine love and contemplation. Universal appeal. The universal themes of love, loss, and the quest for meaning in Sufi poetry transcend cultural and religious boundaries, speaking to the human condition. Mystical experience. The symbolism serves as a medium to convey the ineffable experience of divine unity or love, which words alone cannot fully capture. In conclusion, Sufi poetry is not merely an artistic expression, but a spiritual practice, where symbolism acts as a bridge between the mundane and the divine, inviting the reader to embark on an inner journey towards enlightenment and union with the beloved. Rumi's poetry analysis. Answer. Jalaluddin Rumi, one of the most celebrated poets in the history of Sufism, is known for his profound spiritual insights, which he communicates through an extensive use of allegory, metaphor, and lyrical beauty. Here's an analysis of key aspects of Rumi's poetry, themes and motifs. Love and union with the divine. Rumi's poetry is an ode to love in its purest form, often portraying the human soul's yearning for union with God. The metaphor of lover and beloved is central, where earthly love is a reflection of divine love. Spiritual journey. Much of his work, especially the Masnavi, is structured around the theme of the spiritual path, where life is depicted as a journey from the material to the spiritual, from separation to unity. The soul's exile and return. Rumi often uses the image of the reed flute, ney, to symbolize the soul's exile from its divine origin and its longing to return. This is famously illustrated in the opening lines of the Masnavi, Transformation and Annihilation. Fana, the concept of fana, or the annihilation of the self in the divine, is recurrent. Rumi describes this transformation through various metaphors like the moth's love for the flame or the drop merging with the ocean, unity of being, wahdat al-wujud. Although more subtly, Rumi's poetry reflects the idea that all existence is a manifestation of one divine reality, promoting a mystical monism where the distinction between God and creation blurs. Symbolism, the reed flute, represents the human soul, separated from its origin, lamenting its separation while singing its song of love and longing for God. Wine and the tavern, symbolic of divine love and intoxication, where the tavern is the spiritual gathering place, and wine is the ecstasy of divine love. The sun often symbolizes divine light, knowledge, or the presence of God, guiding the seeker out of darkness, ignorance. The ocean and the drop. The ocean signifies the divine, and the drop is the individual soul, with the ultimate goal being the drop's return to the ocean. Style and structure, ghazals and masnavi. Rumi wrote in both forms. Ghazals are lyrical, expressing deep personal emotion, while the Masnavi is a didactic poem, often called the Quran in Persian, for its spiritual guidance. Repetition and rhyme. Rumi uses repetition for emphasis and to create a meditative, chanting quality that aids in spiritual contemplation. Storytelling. In the Masnavi, Rumi uses stories as parables to convey moral and spiritual lessons, making complex mystical ideas accessible. Language and imagery. Persian language. Rumi's use of Persian is rich with imagery and beauty, drawing from the everyday and the mystical to craft verses that resonate on multiple levels. Nature. Elements like birds, gardens, and rivers are used to illustrate spiritual truths, showing the divine in the natural world. Simplicity and depth. His poetry often starts with simple imagery, but delves into profound spiritual insights, making it universally appealing. Impact and interpretation. Spiritual guidance. Rumi's work serves as a guide for those on the spiritual path, providing comfort, wisdom, and a map for inner transformation. Cross-cultural appeal. His poetry transcends cultural and religious boundaries, speaking to the universal human condition of love, loss, and the search for meaning. Modern interpretations. Today, Rumi's poetry is widely translated and interpreted, sometimes losing some of its cultural and religious context, but gaining in global accessibility. Analysis of a poem, taking the Song of the Reed from the Masnavi as an example. First verse, listen to the reed how it tells a tale, complaining of separations. Here, Rumi introduces the theme of separation and longing. The reed flute, cut from its bed, symbolizes the soul's separation from God. Symbolic depth. The reed's melody is likened to the soul's lament, which everyone can relate to, as all humans experience a sense of loss or yearning for something beyond the physical. Spiritual insight. The poem invites the reader to listen to this inner voice, to recognize that all worldly pleasures fail to satisfy this deep-seated longing for unity with the divine. Universal message. By using the reed, Rumi touches on a universal human experience, making his spiritual message accessible to all, regardless of their religious background. Rumi's poetry, therefore, is not just an artistic endeavor, but a profound spiritual journey laid bare for the reader, inviting them to travel the path he describes through love beyond the self to the divine. More on symbolism. Answer. Rumi's poetry is rich with symbolism, each element weaving together to form a tapestry of spiritual meaning. Here's an expanded look at some of the key symbols used by Rumi and their interpretations. Nature and elements. The garden represents the heart where the seeds of divine love are planted. The garden can symbolize both the soul's potential for spiritual growth and the paradise of divine union. The rose and the nightingale. The rose is often a symbol of divine beauty or the beloved, while the nightingale represents the love of the soul singing in longing for that beauty. This imagery speaks to the pain and joy of divine love. The ocean symbolizes the vastness of God's love or knowledge. The drop, individual soul, seeks to return to the ocean, God, signifying the journey from individuality to unity. The sun and moon. The sun often symbolizes divine light, enlightenment, or the direct experience of God. The moon can represent reflection, the soul's capacity to reflect divine light, or the changing nature of worldly experiences, human conditions. The drunkard represents the Sufi who is drunk with divine love, losing themselves in spiritual ecstasy, where the wine is the love of God leading to spiritual intoxication. The beggar symbolizes humility, the recognition of one's spiritual poverty before God, and the soul's need for divine mercy or grace. Spiritual journey symbols. The path or road. Life is depicted as a journey, with the path symbolizing the way to God. Each step can represent spiritual progression, trials, or lessons learned. The door can symbolize the threshold between the material and the spiritual, the transition from ego to divine essence, or the heart's opening to divine love. The mirror represents self-reflection, but also the soul's capacity to reflect the divine. In Rumi's poetry, it can mean looking within to find God or seeing God in all creation. Mystical symbols. The tavern, a place where one might find spiritual truth or enlightenment, often juxtaposed with traditional places of worship, to emphasize the internal rather than external quest for God. The wine and the cup. Wine symbolizes divine love or ecstasy, and the cup can represent the heart that receives this love. The act of drinking is the soul's partaking in this divine intoxication. The moth and the flame. The moth's attraction to the flame symbolizes the soul's love for God, willing to be consumed entirely in the pursuit of divine union. Cosmic and divine symbols. Light often stands for divine guidance, knowledge, or the essence of God. Light also represents the illumination of the heart through spiritual awakening. Darkness represents ignorance, the ego, or separation from God. The journey from darkness to light is a common metaphor for spiritual enlightenment. The veil symbolizes the layers of the ego or worldly attachments that obscure the divine reality. Lifting or removing the veil signifies spiritual insight or direct experience of God, interplay and multiplicity of meanings. Rumi's genius lies in his ability to layer these symbols so that they speak to different levels of understanding. Literal, the immediate surface-level meaning. Allegorical, stories or symbols that point to moral or spiritual lessons. Mystical, the profound, often ineffable connection to the divine. This multi-layered approach allows Rumi's poetry to resonate with readers at various stages of spiritual development. His symbols are not static, they evolve with the reader's own journey, offering new insights upon each reading or contemplation. This dynamic quality of his symbolism ensures that Rumi's poetry remains timeless, inviting each generation to find their path to the divine through his words. Everything interconnected by all number 25 web pages. The concept of everything being interconnected by all numbers is deeply philosophical and can be approached from various perspectives, including mathematics, spirituality, metaphysics, and science. Here's an exploration of this idea. Mathematical perspective. Number theory. In mathematics, number theory explores the properties and relationships between numbers. The idea that everything is interconnected can be seen in concepts like prime numbers. Primes are fundamental building blocks of all numbers, illustrating how basic elements connect to form complex structures. Number sequences. Sequences like Fibonacci show how numbers are inherently linked, each number being the sum of the two preceding ones, reflecting patterns in nature and the universe. Fractals. These are mathematical sets that exhibit a repeating pattern displayed at every scale. They suggest that the same mathematical principles can describe phenomena at vastly different scales, indicating an underlying interconnectedness. Graph theory. This branch of math deals with networks where nodes, points, and edges, lines can represent any system. It shows how numbers, quantities of connections, define relationships, suggesting a universe where everything is linked. Scientific perspective. Quantum mechanics. Here, the principle of entanglement shows how particles can be instantaneously correlated regardless of distance, implying a fundamental interconnectedness at the quantum level. Chaos theory demonstrates how small changes in initial conditions, numbers, can lead to vastly different outcomes, yet within this chaos there's an underlying order or connection. Network science, everything from ecosystems to social networks, can be modeled as interconnected systems, where numbers play a crucial role in defining relationships and dynamics. Spiritual and philosophical perspectives, Sufism and numerology. As discussed with Rumi, numbers in Sufism can symbolize spiritual truths, suggesting that the spiritual universe is ordered by a divine numerical logic, where everything is part of a larger whole. Eastern philosophies, concepts like the Tao, which can be seen as the underlying unity of all things, or the Buddhist idea of dependent origination, where everything is connected through cause and effect, resonate with the idea of numerical interconnectedness. Jungian synchronicity. Carl Jung proposed that meaningful coincidences or synchronicities could be seen as numbers or patterns that connect seemingly unrelated events, suggesting an underlying unity. Cultural interpretations. Indigenous wisdom. Many indigenous cultures hold that all life is interconnected, with numbers often playing symbolic roles in understanding these connections, like the medicine wheel in Native American traditions. Kabbalah. In Jewish mysticism, numbers are central to understanding the structure of the universe, with the tree of life illustrating how everything is connected through divine numbers or sephirot. Modern interpretations. Digital age, with everything from the internet to blockchain, we see a modern manifestation of numerical interconnectedness where data, which can be represented numerically, links people, information, and systems globally. Universe as information. Some theories in physics propose that the universe might be fundamentally informational or computational at its core, where everything is a complex computation with numbers defining the state of reality. Implications. Holism. This concept encourages a holistic view of reality, where numbers are not just abstract concepts, but the very fabric that weaves the universe together. Interdependence. Understanding this interconnectedness can lead to greater empathy, ecological awareness, and a sense of responsibility towards the whole, as actions, quantifiable through numbers, have ripple effects. Mystical insight. For some, this might suggest that by understanding numbers, one can grasp deeper truths about existence, reflecting the belief that the universe is inherently mathematical. In essence, the idea that everything is interconnected by all numbers is a profound synthesis of various fields, pointing to a cosmos where numbers are not just tools for measurement, but are intrinsic to the structure, function, and meaning of reality itself. Quantum entanglement. Answer. Quantum entanglement is one of the most fascinating and perplexing phenomena in quantum mechanics, offering insights into the fundamental nature of reality. Here's a comprehensive look at this concept. What is quantum entanglement? Definition. Quantum entanglement occurs when two or more particles are generated, interact, or share spatial proximity in such a way that the quantum state of each particle cannot be described independently of the state of the others, even when separated by large distances. Einstein's spooky action at a distance. Albert Einstein famously referred to entanglement as spooky action at a distance because it seemed to violate the principle of locality, where effects should not travel faster than light. Key characteristics. Correlation. When entangled, the state of one particle instantaneously influences the state of the other, no matter how far apart they are. If you measure one particle's spin, for example, you immediately know the spin of its entangled partner. Non-locality. Entanglement suggests that information or influence can be transferred between entangled particles faster than light, challenging classical physics' local realism. Quantum superposition. Before measurement, entangled particles exist in a superposition of all possible states. Once measured, the wave function collapses and the entangled states become correlated. How does entanglement occur? Creation. Entanglement can be created through several processes. Decay. When a particle decays into two or more particles, these can become entangled. Interaction. Particles can become entangled after interacting in certain ways, like photons passing through a beam splitter. Quantum gates. In quantum computing, entanglement can be intentionally created using quantum gates. Types of entanglement. Two-particle entanglement, the simplest form, often referred to as an EPR pair after Einstein, Podolsky, and Rosen. Multi-particle entanglement, more complex systems where several particles are entangled, forming networks of correlations. Experimental evidence. Bell's theorem. John Stuart Bell formulated a way to test whether quantum mechanics or local hidden variable theories better describe reality. Experiments like those by Alain Aspect in the 1980s have consistently supported quantum mechanics, showing correlations that exceed what local realism would allow. Loophole-free Bell tests. More recent experiments have closed various loopholes in Bell's tests, further confirming entanglement's reality. Applications: quantum computing. Entanglement is a key resource for quantum computers, enabling operations like quantum teleportation and providing speed-ups over classical computing. Quantum cryptography. Secure communication protocols like quantum key distribution, QKD, leverage entanglement to detect eavesdropping. Quantum sensing. Entangled photons can enhance measurement precision beyond classical limits, useful in fields like medical imaging or navigation. Quantum teleportation. Information can be teleported from one particle to another through entanglement, although this does not involve physical transport of matter, but rather the transfer of quantum state. Challenges and mysteries. Decoherence. Entanglement is fragile. Interaction with the environment can quickly destroy it, a process known as decoherence. Understanding. Despite being well described mathematically, the nature of entanglement at a conceptual level still puzzles physicists. How does this action at a distance occur without violating causality? Entanglement in larger systems. While well understood at the quantum scale, understanding how entanglement might manifest or be preserved in macroscopic systems remains an area of active research. Philosophical implications, reality and measurement. Entanglement questions the nature of reality and the role of observation in quantum mechanics. Does reality exist independently of measurement, or do we play a part in defining it? Holism versus reductionism. It supports a more holistic view of the universe where parts of a system cannot be fully understood in isolation. Quantum entanglement thus not only challenges our understanding of physics, but also prompts profound questions about the nature of information, causality, and the fabric of reality itself. Continue searching video 005. Thank you for watching 009 in our first discussion 014. We began with the 5 integers of 018 daily prayer 022 that are 2024, 443 and 4031, and independent 033 of other opinions and perspectives 039. In pure mathematics 044 prove the Astro-Mathematical value of 048, the 5 integers 054. The equation of the 5056 cubes of the 5 integers of daily 1 o'clock prayers on this page 104 is an example 114 in this discussion 119. We reflect on another significant 123 astro-mathematical number of the Quran. 129, number 29, 137, number 29, 139, in independent 142 of other opinions and perspectives 149 in a self-evident way. 152 explains the cause of the puzzling 156 position of the basement law 2 o'clock in the first chapter of the Quran 205, the absence of Bismillah 208 in chapter 9 212, and the 2 best meals in chapter 27. 220. The 3 chapters are highlighted 224 with the red dots. 226 on the graph 229. You also notice that chapter 1 is 233, right before 235, the largest 236 chapter of the Quran, with 286 verses 243, and chapter 27 is right after 248, the second largest chapter 250, with 251, 227 verses 256, so the first one 257 is before 259. The largest chapter 303 and chapter 27 307 is right after 308. The second largest chapter 314 in addition. 318 number 29 objectively. 323 explains 324. The 29 secret codes of the Quran 330 that are in the beginning of 29 334 chapters of the book 345. The statement of 350, the proof 351, here 354 is from chapter 27. 4 o'clock, that is 402, one of the 3 puzzling chapters, 412 in this discussion, 416 chapter 27, 418 is also 420, where inshallah 422 we will begin to prove 425. The significance of number 29, 428 in these chapters. 448 chapter 27, 453 has 2 Bismillahs 459. The picture on the left 502 shows that there are exactly 505.29 verses 507 between the first 510 and the second baseman laws of chapter 513, 27, 517. This is the first self-evident 520, signed 522, of the significance of number 29, 526 in relation to basement law 529 in these three chapters, 534. This is also a signed 537 of the deeper 539 mathematical dimensions. 541 of the Quran, 554, chapter 9, 556, has 100 plus 29 verses 604. This simple equation, 607, that divides the 129 verses 611 into 129 615 is very significant, 619, because it is the equation of the 622 composition of the chapter 628. The first 29 verses of the chapter 633 Chilia, we have 635, a noticeable tone and message 640 that is very different, 643, from the following 100 verses 649. This difference 651. And the shift 653 after verse 29, 655 is clear and self-evident, 704. The first 29 verses 707 are about 708, the wartime policies, 712, and in verse 29, 716, we see the last Polish policy, 720 at the end of 722, the first 29 chapters, 727, so the 29, 728 chapters all are about war policy, 733, in verse 29, 736 is 737, the last verse of this group, 749. According to Abdullah Yusuf Ali, 754, in his introduction, 758 to chapter 9, 802, the first 29 verses, 805, music, 807, were very significant, and they were read 810 by 811 Imam Ali alayhi salam, 814 during the Hajj, 817, to give these policies, 819, the widest publicity. 825, this is the second sign. 828 of the significance of number 29, 832 in these three chapters, 836. And a sign of 838, the deeper mathematical dimensions of 840, the Quran 842, which is also self-evident 845 in the simple 846 equation of the composition of the 849 chapter 911 according to 912, a large number of documents, 917 including this one on this page. From 919 Wiki 923 verse 29 of chapter 9 of the Quran is 926, notable 932 as dealing 934 with the imposition of a tax on 936 non-Muslims, 939 who have fallen, 941 under the Muslim rule, 947. This well-known verse 949 verse 29 953 is another sign of the significance of 955 number 29 958. In these three chapters, 1001 but also 1003, a sign of the deeper mathematical 1006 dimension, 1008 of the Quran, 1023. The first 29 verses of chapter 9, 1029, were revealed 1031 on the military campaign of Tabuk, 1038, and after the last 100 verses, 1042, that had been revealed at an earlier 1045 time, 1047. So you have the 100 verses, and then 1049, these 29 come together at a later time, 1055. So you think these 29 in terms of 1058 composition of the book, 11 o'clock should go to the end 1102, but that's not the way it happens. 1105, however, 1108 in composition of the chapter 1112, the 29 verses 1114 that were revealed later. 1117 are before the 100 verses 1121 that were revealed earlier, 1124, which is a remarkable shift. 1127 in the composition of the chapter 1131 and something memorable 1134. This is another sign of the significance. 1137 of number 29, 1139 in these three 1140 chapters, and a sign of the deeper 1144 mathematical dimensions of the Quran, 1201 in addition, 1204 verse 29 of chapter 9, 1207 has exactly 29 words, 1212, which is equal 1214 to the number of words of chapter 1, 1218, and the number of verses between the two 1220 best melodies of chapter 27. 1226, this is 1227, another sign of 1229. The deeper mathematical dimensions of 1232, the Quran, 1234, and the significance of number 29 in 1237. These three chapters, 1248 in mathematical fabric of the Quran, 1253, as we had an example, 1256 in our first discussion. 1258, a clear example, 1301, the chapters and verses numbers 1306, and the number of verses words, letters 1309, and dots 1311. They are all significant. 1326, chapter 9, and chapter 27, 1332 were revealed 1334 in different places. 1338 in different pieces, 1341 in different times, 1344 under harsh, 1346 in chaotic circumstances, 1351 and the Prophet, peace be upon him. 1354 could not read and write, 1359. But the two chapters are related, 1403 in harmony, 1406, and elegantly and mathematically, 1408. Complementary 1413, the two 1415 beautiful equations on this page 1419 are the small parts of a much larger 1423 mathematical 1424 structure 1433. Here are 1434 few more equations. 1440, okay, you notice that the digit sum of 1444 is 9 1446, and the digit sum of 27 is 2 plus 1457 is equal 9, it's the same thing. 1456, the same digit sum. When you apply it to 1459, the number of verses is 1502, 1 plus 2 plus 9 1504 is 12 1508, 9 plus 3 is also 12. 1516, you also notice that 129 1519 is 3 times the prime number 1522. The prime number 43 1526 and number 93 is also 3 times the 1529 prime number 31 1536. You notice that number 9 1539 is the square of 2 1542 and number 27 1545 is the cube of 3. Oh, a square of 39 is 1548. This roughly, 1550 and 1551. S27 is the cube of 3 16 o'clock. You also notice that when it comes to 1603, number 29 1606, when you subtract number 29 from 129 at 1610, gives you a square of 1614 10 1615, and when you 1616 subtract 29 from 93 1619, it gives you a square of 8. 1626. You also notice 1628 that some of the chapter numbers 1632 is equal 1634 to 36. 1636 and the difference of 1637, the chapter verses, is also equal 1640 to 36. 1647, you notice that 93 1650 can be described as the sum of 6 1654 consecutive numbers. 1656. Over here we have number 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 o'clock, 17, 17, 02, and 18, 1707. You also notice 1709 that number 17, 11, 129 is also 1714, sum of 17, 15, 6 consecutive numbers. 1719 that begins right after the 6, 17, 22 consecutive numbers of number 93, 17, 25. Here 1727, the 6 consecutive numbers are 19, 20, 21, 17, 32, 22, 23, and 24, 1738. Here 1742. Both 1744, 93 and 1746, 129, 1748 have exactly the same generating 1750 function, 1752 3 and times nn minus 1 plus 3. 1801, when you plug in 1804 em is equal 6 1808. You get 93 1811, and when you plug in the next 1815 number 1816, which is 7 1820, you're going to get 1821, number 129, 1824. So this is just the tip of the iceberg, 1827, of the mathematical structure here. 1829, inshallah, we reflect on it. 1832 in later discussions. 1839, inshallah, we will continue this work. 1842 in next discussion, which would be 1845, chapter 3. 1848. Thank you for watching, and God bless you. 1851 and your family. 1853 and 1854 circles around you. Show more 25 web pages. The video you've described delves into the numerical and astro-mathematical significance within the Quran, focusing on the number 29 and its relation to specific chapters and verses. Here's a continuation of the analysis based on the transcript. Number 29 and its significance, astro-mathematical value. The discussion starts by highlighting the astro-mathematical value of the numbers associated with daily prayers, setting the stage for exploring other significant numbers like 29, position and absence of Bismillah. Chapter 1, Al-Fatihah. The absence of Bismillah at its beginning is noted as an anomaly, which the number 29 helps to explain in this context. Chapter 9, at Tabuk. Here, the absence of Bismillah is again highlighted, but more significantly, the first 29 verses deal with wartime policies, distinct from the rest of the chapter, which is noted as 129 verses in total, 100 plus 29. Chapter 27, An-Naml. This chapter contains 2 Bismillahs, with exactly 29 verses between them, which is presented as a sign of the number's significance. Mathematical patterns and structures, secret codes. The video mentions 29 secret codes at the start of 29 chapters, linking this number to the structural design of the Quran. Equations and symmetry. The video discusses how these chapters and verses relate through mathematical equations, highlighting the symmetry and harmony in the Quran's composition, even under the chaotic circumstances of revelation. Mathematical insights and implications. Digit sum patterns. Both 9 and 27 have a digit sum of 9, which is seen as part of a larger mathematical framework within the Quran. Prime numbers and multiples. The video points out that 129 is 3 times 43, a prime, and 93 is 3 times 31, also prime, suggesting a deliberate pattern or structure. Square and cube relationships. 9 is the square of 3, and 27 is the cube of 3. Further illustrating the mathematical relationships among these numbers. Consecutive numbers and generating functions. Both 93 and 129 can be expressed as the sum of consecutive numbers with a specific generating function linking them, indicating an intentional mathematical structure. Historical and contextual significance. The positioning of these chapters, their verse counts, and the thematic shift within Chapter 9 are all tied to the number 29, suggesting its role in organizing or emphasizing certain messages or transitions in the Quran. Broader philosophical and spiritual implications. Divine authorship. The intricate mathematical patterns are presented as evidence of divine authorship, or at least an intentional design beyond human capability at the time of the Quran's revelation. Interconnectedness. The video implies that these numbers and patterns are not isolated but part of a comprehensive system, suggesting that every element of the Quran is interconnected. Proof and reflection. This analysis is meant to encourage deeper reflection on the Quran, not just as a religious text, but as a document with layers of meaning, including mathematical ones, which might not be immediately apparent. This exploration of numbers in the Quran reflects a belief in its miraculous nature, where mathematics serves as one of the many dimensions through which its divine origin can be appreciated. However, these interpretations should be approached with a balance, ensuring they complement rather than overshadow the spiritual, moral, and legal guidance the Quran provides. Quran's Mathematical Patterns 7 posts 25 web pages. The Quran's mathematical patterns have been a subject of fascination and debate among scholars, particularly in the context of its miraculous nature. Here's an exploration of some of these patterns. Overview of mathematical patterns. Number repetitions, symmetry and word counts. Certain words appear an equal number of times, like life, al-hayat, and death. Al-maut, both occurring 145 times, or man, al-rajul, and woman, al-mara'ah, both mentioned 24 times. This is often cited as evidence of a balanced and deliberate composition. Chapter and verse. Structure, chapter numbers. The Quran has 114 chapters, surahs, which some claim reflect numerical patterns, like the number of chapters being 19x6, verse counts. Some chapters have verse counts that align with certain mathematical patterns, like the number of verses in some chapters being multiples of 7 or 19. The number 19, code 19. Rashid Khalifa popularized the idea that the number 19 is central to the Quran's mathematical structure, with various elements like the frequency of words, initials at the beginning of certain chapters, and the structure of Bismillah being divisible by 19. However, this theory is highly controversial and not universally accepted. Gematria, letter number correspondence. Abjad numerals. Some scholars use the Abjad system, where each Arabic letter has a numerical value, to find mathematical patterns. For instance, the sum of the numerical values of letters in certain verses or words might correspond with other numbers in the Quran. Mathematical relationships. Prime numbers and squares. There are claims that certain verses or chapter numbers relate through prime numbers, squares, or other mathematical operations. For example, 93 and 129 being multiples of prime numbers, or the difference between chapter numbers yielding significant results. Patterns in initial letters, muqatat. The mysterious letters at the beginning of some chapters are often analyzed for numerical significance. For example, the frequency of these letters in chapters might follow mathematical patterns like divisibility by certain numbers. Other numerical phenomena, golden ratio. Some studies suggest that the Quran's text or structure might reflect the golden ratio, particularly in significant verses or chapter placements. Repetition patterns, patterns in how often certain themes or words appear, like the word day appearing 365 times, are sometimes cited as evidence of deliberate mathematical design. Critical perspective selective counting. Critics argue that many of these patterns depend on selective counting, where only certain instances of words or letters are considered to fit a pattern. Coincidence versus intention. There's debate on whether these are genuine patterns or coincidences that one would find in any large text due to the law of large numbers. Linguistic and historical variations. The Quran has been transmitted through various recitations, qira'at, which can lead to slight differences in letter counts or word forms, potentially affecting numerical analyses. Scholarly debate. While some see these patterns as part of the Quran's miraculous nature, others, including many traditional Islamic scholars, caution against overemphasizing numerology at the expense of the Quran's explicit messages. Conclusion. The study of mathematical patterns in the Quran delves into its structure in ways that aim to illuminate its divine origin or profound nature. However, interpretations of these patterns should be approached with caution, ensuring they complement rather than obscure the Quran's primary roles as a guide for life, law, and spirituality. The debate around these patterns also underscores the rich tradition of inquiry in Islamic scholarship, where both faith and reason intersect. Number 19 in Quran 8 posts 25 web pages. The number 19 in the Quran has garnered significant attention due to claims of its unique mathematical significance, particularly through the work of Rashad Khalifa. Here's an in-depth look at this subject. The mention of 19 in the Quran, Surah 74:30. The only direct mention of the number 19 is found here, where it states, "Over it are 19. This verse refers to the 19 angels guarding hell. Rashad Khalifa's Code 19 Inches, Theory Discovery. Rashad Khalifa, an Egyptian-American biochemist in the 1970s, claimed to have discovered a mathematical code in the Quran based on the number 19. He argued that this code was proof of the Quran's divine origin. Key points of Khalifa's theory. Bismillah. The first verse of the Quran, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, consists of 19 Arabic letters, chapter and verse. Structure. The Quran has 114 chapters, 19x6, and the total number of verses is 6,346, 19x334. Word and letter frequency. Certain words or phrases occur in multiples of 19, like the word Allah, appearing 2698 times, 19x142. Initial letters. Khalifa claimed that the mysterious letters, muqatta'at, at the beginning of some chapters also follow patterns divisible by 19. Controversial aspects. Exclusion of verses. Khalifa controversially excluded 2 verses, 9:128, 129, from his count, arguing they were not part of the original text to fit his theory. This has led to significant criticism. Manipulation of data. Critics argue that Khalifa selectively counted or interpreted data to fit the number 19, questioning the scientific rigor of his methods. Broader interpretations of number 19, other scholars and theorists. Beyond Khalifa, others have explored the number 19, suggesting different interpretations or patterns. However, these are often met with skepticism or seen as less systematic than Khalifa's approach. Cultural and symbolic significance. Even outside of Khalifa's specific claims, 19 has been seen as symbolically significant by some Muslims, representing completion, divine order, or the end of a cycle, as 19 is the 8th prime number. Criticisms and debates. Chance versus design. Many scholars argue that the patterns could be coincidental, given that in any large text one might find numerous patterns if you're looking for them. Linguistic variations. The Quran has slight variations in recitations, qira'at, which can affect the count of letters or words, thus potentially disrupting any claimed numerical consistency. Orthodox view. Mainstream Islamic scholarship often views these numerological interpretations with caution. emphasizing the Quran's message over such numerical claims. The focus is on the Quran's linguistic miracle, moral guidance and legal rulings, implications and reflections, proof of divinity. Proponents of the 19 Code see it as a scientific proof of the Quran's divine origin, appealing to those who might be more swayed by empirical evidence. Spiritual insight. For some, the number 19 offers a layer of spiritual contemplation, reflecting on the meticulous nature of divine revelation, caution in interpretation. There's a call for balance. While numerical patterns can be intriguing, they should not overshadow the Quran's primary teachings on faith, morality, and jurisprudence. Conclusion. The number 19 in the Quran remains a topic of debate. While it has captured the imagination of those looking for mathematical miracles within the text, the interpretations surrounding it are not universally accepted. The discussion around number 19 encapsulates the broader tension between traditional exegesis and modern, sometimes controversial approaches to understanding sacred texts. The number 29 in the Quran, 1 post-25 web pages. The number 29 in the Quran, while not as widely discussed or debated as the number 19, has been noted for certain patterns and significance by some scholars and enthusiasts of Quranic numerology. Here's an exploration of the number 29 in the Quranic context, chapters, surahs, and verses. Chapter 29, known as Al-Ankabut, the spider, it is the 29th chapter of the Quran, consisting of 69 verses. This chapter is named after the spider mentioned in verse 41, highlighting the weakness of false deities compared to the strength of faith in Allah. Verse counts chapter 9 at Tawbah. This chapter has 129 verses, where the first 29 verses are distinct from the rest, often discussed for their wartime policies and legal rulings. Chapter 27, An-Naml. It contains 2 Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim invocations with exactly 29 verses between them, which some interpret as a significant pattern. Specific verses, verse 29 in various chapters. In chapter 9, verse 29 is notable for discussing the imposition of jizya on non-Muslims under Muslim rule. In other chapters, while the number 29 might not hold special significance in isolation, its occurrence can be part of broader numerical analyses. Mathematical patterns. Symmetry and balance. Some analyses suggest that 29 holds a place in the mathematical symmetry of the Quran, especially in relation to chapter lengths or the number of words in key verses. For instance, the number of words in verse 9:29 and in Al-Fatihah, chapter 1, is both 29, suggesting a thematic or structural link. Prime number 29 is a prime number which in numerological interpretations can signify uniqueness or indivisibility, attributes that might be symbolically linked to the purity or simplicity of Quranic teachings. Mysterious letters, muqatta'at. 29 chapters with initial letters, although not precisely 29, there are 29 chapters in the Quran that begin with mysterious letters or combinations of letters, known as muqatta'at. Some might argue this proximity to 29 could be part of a broader pattern, though this is speculative. Historical context and revelation sequence of revelation. The placement of chapters like 9 and 27, alongside the significance of their verses, might reflect the historical context or the thematic transitions during the revelation of the Quran. Interpretations and significant symbolism. The number 29 might symbolize completion, transition, or a new cycle in some interpretations, given its unique position in the Quran's structure or narrative. Numerological discussions. Enthusiasts of Quranic numerology might see 29 as part of a divine code or pattern, suggesting a mathematical beauty or order to the text that goes beyond its linguistic miracle. Cautions and scholarly views. Skepticism. Many traditional scholars exercise caution regarding numerological interpretations, emphasizing the Quran's primary messages over numerical patterns, which they might view as speculative or not directly supported by classical exegesis. Balance in interpretation. While exploring numerical patterns can be insightful, it's important not to lose sight of the Quran's core teachings on faith, ethics, and law. Conclusion. The number 29 in the Quran, like other numbers, can be seen through various lenses, from purely mathematical to symbolic or mystical. The interpretations often depend on one's approach to the text, whether through traditional scholarship, numerology, or a blend of both. However, these numerical insights should be viewed as supplementary to the Quran's explicit guidance, enhancing appreciation for its depth without overshadowing its spiritual and moral directives. More on verse 29-13 posts 25 web pages. Verse 29 in different chapters of the Quran can have distinct significance due to its content, context, or numerical relationship. Let's delve deeper into some notable instances. Chapter 9 at Tawbah, verse 29, textual content, Arabic. Katilu al-wadhina la yu'minuna bil-wahi wala bil-yami lakiri wala yuharwimuna ma harwama al-wahu wa rasuluhu wala yadinuna dina al-haqwi min al-wadhina utu al-kitaba hatwa utu al-jizyaha and yadin wahum sagiruna. Translation: Fight against those who do not believe in Allah or in the last day and who do not consider unlawful what Allah and His Messenger have made unlawful and who do not adopt the religion of truth from those who were given the scripture. Fight until they give the jizya willingly while they are humbled. Contextual background. This verse was revealed during the time of the Tabuk expedition, a military campaign against the Byzantine Empire. It addresses the rules for interaction with non-Muslims who are not under Muslim rule but have engaged in hostility or breached treaties. Legal and historical interpretation. Jizya. This verse introduces the concept of jizya, a tax levied on non-Muslims living under Muslim rule in lieu of military service, symbolizing their submission to Muslim governance while allowing them to practice their religion. Thematic shift. It marks the end of a section in chapter 9 that deals with wartime policies, which is why the first 29 verses are often discussed separately from the rest of the chapter. Numerological insight. As mentioned, this verse contains 29 words in Arabic, which some interpret as part of a broader numerical pattern within the Quran. Chapter 27, An-Naml, verse 29. Textual content, Arabic. Kalat ya ayuha al-mala'u inwi ulkiya ilawa kitabun karimun. Translation: She said, O eminent ones, indeed to me has been delivered a noble letter. Contextual background. This verse comes in the context of the story of Prophet Solomon, Sulaiman, and the Queen of Sheba, Bilqis. Here, the Queen of Sheba is responding to a letter from Solomon, which is about to lead to significant diplomatic and spiritual interactions. Narrative significance. The verse sets the stage for the narrative that follows, where the Queen of Sheba will visit Solomon, leading to her embracing Islam. It highlights themes of wisdom, diplomacy, and the power of divine guidance. Mathematical observation. While not directly related to numerology in this instance, its position within the chapter with two Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim around it, 29 verses apart, might be of interest in numerical analyses. General observations on verse 29. Across different chapters, verse 29 in other chapters doesn't have a uniform theme or significance but can be notable in individual contexts. For example, in chapter 18, Al-Kahf, verse 29 discusses freedom of belief, stating, And say, the truth is from your Lord, so whoever wills, let him believe, and whoever wills, let him disbelieve. In chapter 29, Al-Ankabut, verse 29 relates to the story of Lut, where his people challenge him to bring Allah's punishment if he's truthful. Symbolism and structure. The repeated occurrence of significant content or patterns in verse 29 across different chapters might be seen as part of the Quran's structural or thematic coherence, where each verse number could carry thematic or symbolic weight. Conclusion. While the number 29 and its verses can be part of the broader discussion on Quranic numerology, the primary focus should remain on the content and context of each verse. Verse 929, in particular, has significant legal and historical importance within Islamic jurisprudence, while other instances of verse 29 might highlight different aspects of Islamic teachings or narratives. The exploration of numerical patterns should enhance understanding but not overshadow the Quran's explicit messages.